It's just fantastic.
Captain's Log, Subdate 210112.4. The Chief Justice has mandated that all inmates now must have a job, so murderers will work in a tofu abattoir, and sex offenders will be going wrist to elbow in tofu cows, because they all need their tofu milk. Welcome everyone to the Halls of Injustice. Today we don't have an inmate, don't worry, I have plenty of them waiting. Yes, we'll get to all of them, not to worry. The Lego IsoCube building complex. Yes, it will take shape, and you will all go in there. So instead I'd like to address something I saw via Twitter, courtesy of the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Services, who put out a rather lengthy tweet which encompasses some reports that I find fascinating. So I'm going to read the tweets, and then we'll go to the articles, because I firmly believe updating laws, amending laws to suit relevant changes that are needed is important, and it also makes for a rather pleasant break between dealing with inmates, perps, and Borg. Prosecutors working on gang-related cases which involve women and girls should consider if there is evidence they have been forced or groomed into committing crime according to new legal guidance published today. The guidance, decision-making in gang-related offences, has been drawn up by the Crown Prosecution Service to give lawyers practical advice on building the strongest possible cases and gathering robust evidence to present to the court. Claire Lindley, CPS lead on serious violence, has said, gang-related violence is a blight on our communities, and this guidance will help steer the effective prosecution of those who commit these sickening crimes. But it is vital we look into the evidence behind that involvement, especially where vulnerable women and girls are concerned, to assess if they have been forced or groomed into committing crimes. Now there is a lot more to this, as there is something missing which I find a bit weird. The most notable of which is the fact that it does not address the fact that men can be groomed into committing crime as well. I guess it comes down to how one interprets the investigation and evidence. So it can be argued this legal advice is remarkably gendered. It can be argued, that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to imply or infer any more than that. And as there are plenty of extra sources within the legal guidance for gang-related offences, there is enough wiggle room to say this is not, in fact, gendered at all. It is merely taking into account a prevalence that affects women and children more than men. So the guidance starts off with definitions. For example, what is a gang? For this, the definition accepts it has to consist of at least 3 people and have more than one characteristic that enables its members to be identified by others as a group. I guess by that definition then, I was in a gang in secondary school, with myself and 2 dorks, called the KIB, the Kids in Blue. That's not even a joke. Men in Black was popular, so we were the Kids in Blue because our school jumpers were blue. They do also add the definition for urban street gangs, organised crime groups, which is OCGs, and also accepting what county lines have when it comes to the impact of networking export-import of illegal, let's say, Haribo, and other such narcotics. These definitions are important because without them people can say, yes, but what is a gang? Well, thankfully the legal guidance has defined it for you. The legal guidance then goes on to discuss gang culture, which often involves serious and widespread criminal offending. Gangs often have strong ties with affiliated serious organised crime offenders, which is based on a shared acquisitive interest and peripheral links formed usually in prison. The ties then provide a pathway for individuals to be drawn into OCGs, organised criminal gangs, which leads on to more serious offending. As is custom with gangs, they prey on vulnerable people and coerce them into becoming involved with crime. Violence may be threatened or used to ensure new recruits stay with the gang and carry out the activity, criminal activity, to fund its existence and, of course, its hierarchy. All hail the king of the Kids in Blue. I might be a tad old for that title now, One of the biggest causes of gang-related offences is drug dealing, as it is the simplest way to provide wealth to a select group at the top of that earlier mentioned hierarchy. To ensure the transactions go ahead peacefully, gang members who deal carry weapons to protect themselves during dealing activities. This leads to increased carrying of firearms and knivs as a sign either of retaliation or respect, or of course, to emulate the infamous gangster culture. You'll know this because they'll all be called OG something, OG What's It, OG Doodah, OG Thingamabob, and OG Bob. The most fearsome of all, OG Trevor. Because of how gangs have changed to adapt to current society, they have obviously changed to include social media, which in turn, makes the internet a much darker place, but understandably, you have freedom to do whatever you want on the internet, until the internet is controlled by your respective governments, or the sites you use make editorial decisions, which they should never be doing. So understandably, gangs use music, social media to promote their culture. They glamorize the lifestyle and the use of weapons. They post videos online that seek to taunt rivals, incite violence, or glamorize criminality. So those videos usually show them brandishing weapons, including incendiary remarks about recent incidents of young people being harmed, injured, or life-ended, along with threats to cause serious harm to specific individuals and members of rival groups. This is all fairly obvious and basic, but because the legal guidance has been updated, it's actually fascinating that they are attempting to understand gangs, which they kind of gloss over with the poverty part. Vulnerable was the key word there. The next subject goes on to talk about gangs in prisons, but as is well established, UK prisons are remarkably soft, and gangs operate in UK prisons as a rite of passage. They have done for decades, possibly a century or two, maybe longer. I'm personally so old I can't remember if the Kids in Blue was in the 90s or 80s or possibly the 1800s. I really don't know anymore. The point is, while this legal guidance does reference prisons and gang operations, the prisons aren't in control of the prisoners. They haven't been for some time. It's why religious extremism is being bred in prisons. It is known about. It is well established. An interesting point raised by the entire guidance paper itself is about proving somebody was in a gang, because it has become a crux and a problem in courts. How do you prove somebody was a member of a gang? It's not the easiest one to resolve. But, thankfully, when it comes to prosecution of gang offences, there are evidential issues, admissibility of evidence of gang membership, along with suitable guidance as to how best to prove this, which then enables prosecutors the best opportunity to sentence somebody to the ISO cubes, which I find to be very satisfying. Something later on referenced that is often overlooked is the Modern Slavery Act of 2015. People forget that while slavery has happened in the past to a far graver scale and vaster numbers, there is still a form of slavery in effect in most countries to this day. By all means, if you are that pedantic person who wants to play semantics, now say, ooh, minimum wage, full-time job, earning bare minimum, you're a slave. Or, if you have a job, you're a slave to the machine. Go nuts. You know I don't mind. The whole point of this, I guess, is to highlight how the rules are changing. The guidance is allowing for more in-depth prosecution, knowing what one can and cannot use, what one can and cannot do, and how one can and cannot prosecute someone and prove that somebody is a part of this, which is why this guidance is quite important. I am going to link it down below for all of you to read if you would like to. There is also a link to a Cliff's Notes version, because I know someone will not want to read it all. Probably not that either, so I'll link the tweet as well. If you don't want to read that, oh well, at least I put them there, right? As we're done, I'd like to know what you think about the changes, about the definitions, about how one can and cannot, as a prosecutor, prove someone is a part of a gang, the impact of gangs, networks, of course. It is quite fascinating, and I might do a follow-up to go into this a bit more because it is quite interesting to me. So please do let me know in the comments down below.